Matthew chapter 27. 2 more chapters to go, and I really don't know how I'm going to feel about doing these sections here. I think it's really interesting because it's like the crucifixion stuff, part of the story. The passion narrative is coming up, and it's just there are a few different ways I see people approach things now. We just had like big tragedy in the news, and everybody was just making fun of everything. These people died, a very famous thing, but nobody really knew them personally, and they weren't like famous. When famous people die, you kind of feel like you know them, so there are a lot of people that are sad about it. But in this case, they were just rich people, and everybody made jokes about it. It was made worse by how their family reacted. It just shows how inhumane everything is. And I see that with people in Christianity. There are some people who think that it's funny to make fun of this type of thing. Even Family Guy, which is a cartoon show, makes fun of this religion stuff quite a bit, and they're not very caring about how they make fun of it most of the time. I'm guilty of having watched Family Guy from time to time, and it's just interesting for me to see how people react to Jesus' story. As I study it, though, it's funny to me because I feel myself, as I get older, being more and more reverent when I read it and understand really what it means. I don't think there's any way to get around that. I think that as you grow and mature, you do have more reverence for things that matter because you've had lots of experience with the things that don't. In fact, some of the most devout Christians that I've ever known are people with really not very Christian upbringings. And they've seen the other side, and because of that, they embrace Christianity wholeheartedly, fully, without, no regrets. Just grab onto it. I don't know what I was rambling about, but as I read this, it does, each time I reread it, I get a little bit more, emotional, responsive. I don't know what it is. So anyways, in chapter 27, when morning came, all the chief priests and the elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. And they bound him and led him away, delivered him over to Pilate, the governor. So an interesting point here is, so morning came, they weren't supposed to hold a council at night. They arrested Jesus at night to avoid the crowds. They're terrified of the crowds. So there are quite a few people who they've probably whipped up into a fury over Jesus and saying that he's a big threat to the nation and threat to religion. And there are people that definitely want to crucify him. There are definitely crowds that want to, but there are also crowds that they're terrified of because they hold him as a prophet and they do not want him crucified. So they do it in the middle of the night. And this shows that the chief priests in the morning had to come together and basically say, yeah, what we did yesterday, we need to make it official. So they had condemned the man before it could even be legal according to their own standards. So they're breaking their own laws, which is any totalitarian society, any non-liberal society. By liberal, I mean, like a Western view of liberalism, freedom of expression. And anyway, they're showing that they're not living by their own rules here. That's not ever a good thing, really. In verse 3, then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood. They said, what is that to us? See to it yourself. Throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed, and he went and hanged himself. But the chief priest, taking the pieces of silver, said, it is not lawful to put them into the treasury, since it is blood money. We can't even put this money that we paid for blood money back into the treasury. Again, not exactly following their own rules to the T. What's the intent there? Are they living by the intent? No, and they're selfishly trying to figure out what to do with this money. So they took counsel and bought with them the potter's field as a burial place for strangers. Therefore that field has been called the field of blood to this day. Then was fulfilled what had been spoken by the prophet Jeremiah, saying, and they took the 30 pieces of silver, the price of him on whom a price had been set by some of the sons of Israel, and they gave them for the potter's field as the Lord directed me. Verse 11. So now Jesus stood before the governor, and the governor asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You have said so." But when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he gave no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they testify against you?" But he gave him no answer, not even to a single charge, so that the governor was greatly amazed. So I think that's an interesting point as well, because Jesus is before the governor and he responds favorably to Pilate, but not to his own people. He's not recognizing the authority of the priests and elders who are accusing him, but he does recognize the authority in the magistrate and the local governor, Pilate. I thought that was kind of interesting. And Jesus is doing this because Jesus is showing that the authority belongs to God. So in verse 15, now at the feast the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called Christ?" For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So now they've got two crowds that they're scared of. They've got the chief priests and the people that they've paid off to tell them to crucify Jesus. And then you have the Jesus mobs who are somewhere around not wanting Jesus to be crucified, but he was taken in the middle of the night, and this is all happening very fast. They're trying to get it through. So when Pilate saw he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." And all the people answered, "His blood be on us and on our children." Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. So that is the Pilate washes his hands of it, and the people take on the responsibility of Jesus' crucifixion and his blood on them and their children. So the people answered. Pilate releases Barabbas, and having had Jesus scourged, delivered him to be crucified, whipped. So they scourged, whipped Jesus. Most likely, there's a note in my Bible, the reason that they probably did this was so that he would die on the cross faster. It's kind of an interesting piece of information how they put it in the Bible, because that could be seen as a sign of mercy or a sign of punishment, evil, wickedness, cruelty, right? Less time on the cross. But at the end of the day, they're murdering somebody for a blasphemy charge who is the Son of God on false charges because they misunderstand the message. So after all of this, Pilate is washing his hands. People outside the situation and the magistrate, the government of that region, for the Romans even, are going, "You guys are a little bit crazy here." Right? He's saying, what has he done? What has he actually done? And they won't answer. Crucify him. They've decided that he's going to die no matter what. And so Jesus is delivered by Pilate to be whipped and scourged and then crucified. So again, he's been forsaken by his betrayer, Judas. He's been forsaken by his disciples who ran off. His most loyal disciple, supposedly. Peter, who he's going to build the church on, denied, forsaken. Denied by the community that he's been serving, the priests and the scribes of that community. Nope. Forsaken. They hand him over to be crucified. The government authority that he is supposed to be able to appeal to, forsaken. They bend to the will of the people. They don't uphold their mandate from God. The reason that God gives earthly authority is to punish the wicked and to reward the good. Over and over again in the Bible, that's what the magistrate is for. They fail. Jesus is forsaken by his friends, by his community, by his government. And next up, he's mocked and crucified. So I'm going to stop there, verse 26, and we'll pick up after that. But put down below what you thought of this section. If anything, if you have any comments or points that you find interesting, I'd love to hear them. Like and subscribe to catch all these videos as they come out, and I'll catch you in the next one. All right, peace.